Well, hello, Village Heights. Thank you so much for being here today on Labor Day weekend at all. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. It's kind of nice outside, right? We load out a trailer every Sunday, and we were done this Sunday unloading the trailer, and I'm like, I'm not wet. I'm not drenched. I'm not soaking. I'm like, thank the Lord. The season is changing, right? So it's exciting. But also exciting because today we are opening a new collection, starting a new collection today called Take the Lead. And I love talking about leadership. It's one of my favorite subjects, and it's one that I don't think is talked about enough. Because leadership is a crucial part of development in life. We need it, and others need it from us. And how do we do that? So we call it take the lead. How do we take the lead? Because there's moments in your life, and probably right now, where you're looking at a situation or a person, and they're going through something, you're going, am I supposed to take the lead? Am I supposed to jump in and help lead this person or this group, right? And you're kind of hesitant. It's like, well, who am I to do that? And how would I even begin? Where do I even start? Leadership is most needed in times of uncertainty because uncertainty is kind of like turbulent waters. It's like if you've ever been to the beach and you're kind of walking out into the water, like, oh, that looks fun, right? And so you're walking out and the waves are hitting you. It's kind of like at your knees and to your waist. And then it gets to about like your chest and your head. And then the waves start boxing you around. And then you're like, this isn't fun anymore, right? But you're turning around. I'm still enjoying this, to all your friends and family that are on the shore, so they're not worried about you, right? And I remember as a kid, it can mess with you so much. And you don't understand that there's currents under the water. And so I remember as a kid, I go out and let the water box me around for a little bit, bop me around, disorient me. And I'll look up, and I've gone like a mile down the shoreline, right? And I can see my mom walking, down the shoreline to come get me, It messes with you. When you're in turbulent waters, you're not sure which way is up, which is down, what's left, what's right. You don't realize how far that you're going. It disrupts life. And it keeps you from fully understanding what's going on. And it could possibly even take you down. You can get so overwhelmed by the waves that it can take you under and you don't come back up. And it's always so weird, right? Because when you're on the shore and you're watching somebody from the shore and they're in the waves and they're like, why are they struggling? What's wrong? If they could only just take a few steps this way, or if you're out in the deeper water where there's no waves, you're like, if they'll just swim 10 feet backwards, they'll be fine. But you can't see that. You don't know that because you're in the middle of it. You're in the middle of this uncertainty. And in light of everything that's happened in the past 2 years, we're all picking up the pieces. We're moving forward the best that we can. And I know that because what everybody says now is the new normal, right? Some of you are probably sick of hearing that word, the new normal, right? What does that even mean? That means I'm trying. That's what that means. It's like the new normal is like, I'm giving it a shot, okay? I don't know what is normal anymore. I'm just trying. And so for many of us, we have a responsibility of helping other folks move forward in this time, like family members, employees, team members, students, or the community. If you're a parent, manager, a business owner, an executive, a teacher, a coach, a mayor, or part of a city council, people are looking to you for direction. They are looking for inspiration, and mainly, and probably more importantly, they're looking for hope. They're looking for somebody to tell them, it's going to be okay. There's going to be a future. There's going to be something better. I know that you don't like it right now, but stick with it. And leading under normal circumstances, so 2019 and before, right? What we know is normal circumstances. Leading in those is hard enough. It wasn't easy before that. It was still hard. But leading in the circumstances that we faced in the past 2 years, it's not for the faint of heart. I don't know about you, but when I went to college, there was not a course on pandemics. That did not happen. I think there should have been, because history has kind of proven it cycles. This kind of happens again and again. We've had it happen many times in our history. And so they should have had just one semester, just a few hours of credit of like, hey, if this happens again, this is what you do, okay? This is how you lead people through it. In the past, this is how they did it and how they got people through. But the people that are looking to us for leadership have no idea how unprepared we are. Have no idea. And they have no idea how incapable we feel. Because when it comes to leading, they're hoping that you have the answers. And it's not like they go, oh, it's okay. You're doing your best. They don't do that. No, it's like, no, you're in charge. And now I want something to happen. That's the way it is. They put it on you. But here's the truth. We don't have all the answers. We don't. We don't always know what to do. We're not always going to get it right. That's a very important one. We're not always going to get it right. And honestly, we're making it up as we go along. At least I am. I don't know about some of you if you're just experts in the future in leadership and what you're doing. But really, that's what life is, just kind of making it up as you go along. You're like, this is a new situation. We've never faced a pandemic before, right? When this hit, all the pastors and ministers are like, the internet's evil, YouTube's evil. All of a sudden, they love the internet and love YouTube, right? So because they had to go digital, right? We all became these biblical, evangelical YouTubers. That's who we were, these evangelists that were on YouTube. That's what we became, right? And there was groups forming, and they're kind of screaming, what do we do? What do we do? We don't have it all together. There was no course in college on how to do this. But having the discipline and humility to admit you don't have all the answers will actually make you a better parent. It'll make you a better boss, a better teacher, a better government official, which I don't see that happening anytime soon, a government official admitting they're wrong, a better coach, a better leader. It will make you better. So, when we find these places where we're deficient as a leader, we must adapt because there are people who are wandering in uncertainty, and they need somebody to lead them. The truth is, people are looking to us for direction. And uncertainty, it's a permanent part of life. It's a permanent part of the equation of leadership. And if you're not in a season of uncertainty, you will be. When you get that new job, when you find that spouse, when you have a kid, when you find yourself in these places, you will find uncertainty. And uncertainty is why the world needs leaders. It's exactly why we need them. And it's why your family, company, and city needs you. And so my hope through this collection over these 4 weeks is that I want to equip you. I want to equip you to be the best leader for the people in your life, right? Now, I know it's just 4 weeks, and I don't even know everything about leadership, right? And so I would have to go listen to somebody else or take a lesson or that kind of thing. But I'm going to give you 3 key aspects of leading people, and especially in uncertainty, right? These are very important aspects that we should all have in our leadership tool belt, but these aspects are really important when you're leading people who are stuck in the crashing waves of uncertainty. So, before I give you these 3 aspects, you're like, oh, just give them to me now. That way I don't have to listen to the rest of them. Nah, I'm not going to do that. Before I give you these 3 aspects, there's a very important principle of leadership that we must discuss first. And this important principle that we find it in Scripture in the Old Testament, and it draws a broader picture of our responsibility of being leaders and our influence and what we do with it. So whether it's at home, whether it's at work or in the community, this powerful story that we're going to go over will remind us that leadership is a stewardship. Okay, if you're taking notes, now it's time to start writing. Okay, leadership is a stewardship. So a steward was someone appointed by the king to represent the king. A steward had the authority because the king loaned them authority. So authority was given to a steward, but it also could be taken away. So when a king obviously can't divide himself, make more of himself, so what he would do, he's like, I'm going to send this person that I trust to represent me, right? And so in this time, they have my power, right? What they say goes as if it was me, and that was loaned to them. And so we find this is true of our influence in leadership as well. And the more successful successful you are, the easier it is to lose sight of that. The more that you think, I did this, I made this happen, it all was me, you lose sight of the fact that it's all a stewardship and it's on loan anyways. So to make this as clear as possible for you guys, that leadership is a stewardship, we don't have people, we have a responsibility to people. Right? I tell my staff this, anytime you come on staff and for the first time or whatever, I say, I know I don't own you. I have this window where I get to be your leader. And I get to help you along. And my hope is that I will lead you in such a way that, and Village Heights is probably not going to be your forever. And I get that. And that's okay. And it shouldn't be. You should be graduating to bigger things or whatever it may be. If it is, great, really cool, but it's not likely, okay? And so what I tell them is like, I want to make you the best version of you so that when you leave here, you're doing great things and you're a better person and you're a better leader because of that. And so then they come back to me and go, how did you do it? I'm thankful. And I'm like, it's all me, guys. No, I'm just kidding. No, just kidding. But we don't own people. We have a responsibility to people. So someone loaned us our responsibility. So that's why all leadership is a stewardship. And so here's the second thing. The second thing is that it's temporary. It has an expiration date on it. Just like the clock, tick, tick, tick. It never stops. And your window of leadership influence has a window, which means it has a beginning and it's going to have an end. Eventually, it's going to run out. Either you're going to give it away or it's going to be taken away. It's temporary because we're temporary. We have a beginning and we have an end. There's a joke in our house that any one of us are sick and, if it's real bad, we'll jokingly say to each other, are you going to die? You dying on me? And Hannah asked me that and said, yeah, I am actually. Not right now, but little by little, every day, I'm always dying in some degree. There is an end to me. I might not be soon, but it's coming, okay? She hates the joke, but sometimes she gives me pity laugh just like she did right now. But knowing there's an expiration date changes how we proceed. And you're like, I don't know about that. Okay, when you are about to prepare some food and you glance down at the expiration date, just happen to see it, it really changes how you treat that food, right? Right? You're like, oh, kids, we're having steak tonight because tonight's the only night that we can have it. Otherwise, you're not having it, right? Or you went by and you're pulling the chicken out and you're like, ooh, it has turned. We're not having chicken. We're having McDonald's. And the kids scream, yay, kind of thing. Expiration date changes things and how you treat it. So we should treat the end with the end in mind because there is an end. Now, don't treat it for the end, but treat it with the end in mind, okay? So eventually, our time runs out, and when it ends, your legacy will be established. It will be established. And your legacy and memory will probably be established in your final chapter, not necessarily your finest chapter. And that's true. That's why you see quarterbacks who win a couple Super Bowls, they're like, I'm out, okay? Because they want to remember for that, not getting old and their knees don't work anymore and their arm doesn't work and now they're failing everything. Now, that's not what, they want to remember for the good times. And so they'll bow out, right? It's not fair, but it's true. That's how it happens. So leadership is a stewardship. It's temporary. And why does that matter so much? You're like, why do I care? Because it is a stewardship and because it is temporary, that means we are accountable for it. We are accountable for the leadership that we are given. Everybody is accountable to somebody for how they steward influence. So today's text reminds us that our accountability extends beyond our boss, beyond our board, beyond our constituency, and our base. That we have to answer to something higher than what we think it is. And if you believe that all men and women are created equal in God's image, and then the people you lead and the children you raise are technically your brothers and sisters. They're not separated from you. They're in this with you. They are a part of the game. So we are accountable to God for how we leverage our influence. And this is, Jesus modeled this, and he taught this. In this text, is going to illustrate that. So our story, let's jump in. Our story takes place about 580 BC. It focuses on an extraordinary military leader and political leader of the time. He was the king of Babylon. And unfortunately, he confused progress with greatness and was brought to his senses in a rather unusual way. And I hope that that never happens to any of us. But I will have a camera if it does, and you'll find out why. His name was King Nebuchadnezzar. If you haven't had a kid yet, name your kid. King Nebuchadnezzar, please. That's a long name. Most powerful man at his time in the world, and he was the king of Babylon. He resided in Babylon, and for about roughly 20 years before the story takes place that we're going to talk about, his army invaded Judah. The city of Jerusalem was spared. So he invaded Judah, and he spared the city of Jerusalem, right? And so Nebuchadnezzar, and this is kind of like how they became powerful, their kingship and their township became powerful in that time, was that they would take the cream of the crop, right? The best and brightest in whatever town they just conquered, other city they just conquered, and take them back to their own town to put them with their cream of the crop, I guess to make their crop creamier. I don't know. But that's what they would do, and it would make them more powerful. In this time, when he conquered Judah, there was 4 names that were included in this number of people. It was Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and Daniel. So years later, Nebuchadnezzar returned to Jerusalem. He's like, I forgot some things over there. I need to go back, right? And so he sacked and looted the city, destroyed the temple. And the reason they did that, nothing demoralized a people in that time by destroying the temple of the God that they worshiped. It was a visual representation of what they wanted to do to them. They wanted to take them down in every way possible, even spiritually. And so he moved everything from the temple of Jerusalem to the temple of Babylon, and he put it all in a palace vault. Remember that part of the story, because that's going to be very important as we get to the end, okay? That he took all the belongings from that temple and put it in the palace vault. Okay, so for Daniel and the Judeans exiled in Babylon, the moral of the story for them, why this all kind of happened, was that God was judging the nation of Israel for its disobedience. They were being naughty children, and they needed to be taught a lesson. So basically, God was putting the nation in timeout until they got their covenant act together, okay? But King Nebuchadnezzar didn't see it that way. That's not how he saw it. How he saw it was that his God, Marduk, that was the name of his God. It sounds like a dog. I understand. That should have been a sign. Marduk was more powerful than the Jewish God, Yahweh. That's the way he saw it and interpreted the situation. That Israel's God had lost, so that now was the end of the story. On the contrary, that was not the end of the story. And it's why we know this story today. It's why we talk about this story today, because of that decision right there. So, Daniel recorded these events, these unusual events, and he was in Babylon for about 20 years by this time before what we're about to talk about happened, and he became a trusted advisor to the king Nebuchadnezzar. So according to Daniel, King Neb, the nebulizer, Nebi boy, had a disturbing dream, and it was so real and felt so powerful. It was significant. He knew it was significant to him. You ever happen to you where you have a dream and you wake up and you're like, what are you trying to tell me, God? What's going on? Should I be watching my back, right? Not the dreams where like your spouse did something and now you wake up and you're mad at them. Not that kind of dream. Forgive them. It wasn't them, I promise. So you have these dreams and it's like, man, it was so real. That's what happened to him. It's so real that he woke up scared. And that's where we're going to pick up. So in Daniel 4:4-5, we'll start there. It says, I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at home in my palace, contented and prosperous. That's what I'm going to start saying. I'm contented and prosperous. That's what I'm going to say to people. And I had a dream that made me afraid. As I was laying in bed, the images and visions that passed through my mind terrified me. Think about that. This king, he was all-powerful, on top of the world, wasn't afraid of anything. This dream scared him that much. His dream, and just kind of sum it up for you, it was about a beautiful giant tree that was visible to all the earth, and all the animals rested under the canopy. It provided food for all the earth's creatures. And then in the dream, he hears a voice from heaven that says, cut it down. And then suddenly, it was a stump. All that beauty was gone. All the creatures were gone. All of a sudden, it was a stump. And then a voice says, and this is where we pick up in Daniel 4:15, it says, the middle of 15, it says, let him be drenched with the dew of heaven, and let him live with the animals among the plants of the earth. Let his mind be changed from that of a man, and let him be given the mind of an animal, till 7 times pass by for him. The decision is announced by messengers. The holy ones declare the verdict, so that the living may know that, and this is a vital point for old Nebi and us. The Most High is sovereign over the kingdoms of men, and gives them to anyone he wishes, and sets over them the lowliest of people. Nebuchadnezzar wakes up terrified, and he knows it has something to do with me. I know it does. And he calls on all the usual suspects to kind of interpret. The people, his advisors, spiritual advisors. He's like, what does it mean? Can you help me? Either they can't interpret it, or they won't. Okay? Can you imagine not being the guy that wants to bring the bad news to the CEO or the leader or the boss, Even so, that boss or leader or CEO can have you killed and have nothing happen to them, right? And you're like, I don't want to bring the bad news. I don't want to be that guy. And so eventually, he's going on, he calls on Daniel. And so when Daniel hears Nebuchadnezzar's dream, he's terrified. It scares Daniel. And King Nebuchadnezzar actually has to comfort Daniel. Can you imagine that? You get scared by something, and then you tell somebody about it, and they're supposed to interpret it, and then it scares them so bad that you have to comfort them. Can you imagine that situation? And this is what Daniel says to him in response after he's been cuddled for a little bit. It's in 4:19, it says, my Lord, if only the dream applied to your enemies in its meeting to your adversaries. I mean, this is so bad. This is what you want to happen to the other people, not you. But it's not. It's about you. I would imagine that Daniel kind of steps back and begins to tell the meaning of the dream. And he's going through it, and kind of just to help sum it up, he says, the Most High has decreed that you will be driven away from the people, that you will become like a wild animal. You will humiliate yourself publicly, and this will go on until you acknowledge that. And he probably takes another step back, just out of arm swinging distance. And it says, the Most High, not you, not Marduk, is sovereign over the kingdoms of men. Let me drop down to 4:26. It says, your kingdom will be restored to you when you acknowledge that heaven rules, and therefore your majesty is to be pleased to accept my advice. He's like, please, King, please hear me. Take my warning. Heed to it. Renounce your sins by doing what is right, and your wickedness by being kind to the oppressed. It may be that then your prosperity will continue. Nebuchadnezzar, old Nebi, who was terrified, but apparently not enough because he didn't change. He didn't do anything. For 12 months, he stayed the same, and that's kind of where the story picks up again in Daniel 4:29. It says, 12 months later, as the king was walking on the roof of the royal palace of Babylon, he said, and I imagine it to be kind of like a Michael Bay movie. It's like this music and everything's kind of slow motion and the lights are really cool. And he says, this is what is decreed. No, sorry, wrong spot. It says, is not this the great Babylon that I have built as the royal residence by my mighty power and the glory of my majesty? He's basically like, it's all me, baby. I'm on top of the world. It's me. I did this. My majesty, my power. Can you imagine what happens next? I think you can. In 31, it says, even as the words were still on his lips, when a voice came from heaven, this is what is decreed for you, King Nebuchadnezzar. Your royal authority has been taken from you. It was taken because it was given, it was a loan, it was a stewardship, it was temporary. And Nebuchadnezzar, you didn't know it, but you're accountable for what I've given you. And you have been called to account. You made it all about you, and now you're through. Let's continue on in verse 32. It says, you will be driven away from the people and will live with the wild animals. You will eat grass like an ox. 7 times will pass by before you until you acknowledge that the Most High is sovereign over the kingdoms of men and gives them to anyone he wishes. Immediately, what had been said about Nebuchadnezzar was fulfilled. He was driven away from people and ate grass like the ox. His body was drenched with dew of heaven until his hair grew like the feathers of an eagle and his nails like the claws of a bird. What a handsome man, right? Nebuchadnezzar had lost his mind. And it's believed that he was stricken with something called boanthropy. And boanthropy is a psychological disorder where the sufferer actually believes that they are a cow or an ox. Can you imagine that? So later, they found him crawling on all fours around the palace, maybe still upstairs. I don't know, maybe still on top of the roof, on his hands and knees. And so they took him out. They tried to sneak him out to a private garden where he could feed, and graze, and to kind of help keep it secret. And he lived there. And eventually, he came back to his senses. Eventually, 7 times had passed, and he came back to his senses. And when he's told what had happened, he was humiliated. Can you imagine being all-powerful, so full of yourself, and then learn, oh, you became an animal, and you fed, and we all just watched it happen. Humiliated. He put it all together after hearing that. And he's remembering Daniel's interpretation. And Daniel recorded Nebuchadnezzar's confession. He said, at the end of that time, I, Nebuchadnezzar, raised my eyes toward heaven, and my sanity was restored. Then I praised the Most High. I honored and glorified him who lives forever. His dominion is an eternal dominion. His kingdom endures from generation to generation. No one can hold back his hand. Remember that part, his hand. That's another part you need to remember to the end. No one could hold back his hand or say to him, what have you done? Then jump down to verse 37. It says, now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and exalt and glorify the King of heaven, because everything he does is right, and all his ways are just. And those who walk in pride, and here's another lesson for Nebuchadnezzar and for us, he is able to humble. Doesn't matter who you are, he is able to humble. Leadership, even kingship, is a stewardship. It's a gift and it's temporary. It doesn't last forever. And leaders and kings are accountable. We dare not leverage our leadership to oppress others. This didn't happen in secret, right? So in this time, they had slaves, right? And slaves, where there were slaves, their secrets were passed, right? Because you ever heard of the term, the walls have ears, right? And so in this time, they're watching this. They're seeing the king graze around, and I'm sure they are loving it, right? So they are spreading it like wildfire. And so it wasn't held to a secret. It probably circulated throughout the royal family for generation and generation and generation. Perhaps beyond that, because we're actually talking about it today. And so after this happened, after he came to his senses, and he renounced himself and said the Most High God and worshiped and said who was most powerful, 40 years go by, right? And so he then enjoyed his kingdom for all that time. 40 years go by. King Nebuchadnezzar dies. The golden age of Babylon dies with him because King Nabonidus is the new king of Babylon, but he's no Nebuchadnezzar. He can't fill those shoes, and he knows it, right? And so with him, the glory of Babylon begins to fade. And so the Persians, under the leadership of Cyrus the Great, in this time chose, it's time to flex our economic and military prowess. It's time to show off. It's our turn to be in control, right? And so Cyrus sets his sights on the great city of Babylon. And so he launches this campaign of conquest and destruction. And Babylon would be the ultimate prize. The city of Babylon, if he could take that over, that would be the jewel in his crown for Cyrus. So King Nabonidus appoints Belshazzar to be in charge of the city. So he knows I'm not going to be able to do this on my own, right? And I'm going to try to stop Cyrus before he gets to Babylon, right? So King Nebuchadnezzar takes the Babylonian army and he sets out to attack and to stop them before they can get to Babylon. So Cyrus decimates the Babylonian army, decimates them and captures Nebuchadnezzar, and then next marches on Babylon. He's like, all right, this is the time to strike. I've ruined their army, and so here we go. So he heads on to Babylon, and he's aware. See, one of the things that made Babylon so powerful is that it was almost impenetrable, right? It was such a fortress, such a place that was really hard to get into. So that's one of the things that made Nebuchadnezzar so powerful was that you couldn't take over his city. You couldn't do it, right? And so knowing this, he still went after him. He still went after Babylon. So meanwhile, in the city, Belshazzar, who now probably considers himself to be king, not probably, does consider himself to be king because he knows that Nebuchadnezzar has been captured, he prepares the city for siege. And so he reinforces the gates, he puts guards in the right places. Now, he kind of prepares, and as he's preparing, the Persian army is beginning to surround the city. So you can imagine that image. If you've seen Lord of the Rings or any kind of war movie, you know what I'm talking about. You can imagine they're battening down the hatches, and the opposing army is gathering around, right? But he is so confident that the Persians won't breach the walls that he feels like they're going to die, freeze, or starve before they can make it over, right? Because it is so well fortified. So he thought there was no way they could make it into the city. And so with the city defenses set now, Belshazzar decides, I'm going to show how confident I am. I'm going to throw a party. While they are gathering around the city, I'm going to throw a party on the inside to show how confident and unafraid I am of them. So that's what he does. He starts a party, and it's bumping. You've been in that kind of party before, and I'm sure it's a good one. It's kind of they're living it up in there. It's important to note when we talk about next is that Belshazzar was actually the grandson to King Nebuchadnezzar. He was his grandson. So all the stories, all the rumors, he would have had to heard. So this is what happens next. Daniel 5:1. King Belshazzar gave a great banquet for 1,000 of his nobles and drank wine with them. While Belshazzar was drinking his wine, he gave orders to bring the gold and silver goblets that Nebuchadnezzar, his father, it says father, it just means his lineage, it's really his grandfather, had taken from the temple in Jerusalem. So remember, all that stuff was taken, it was put in the palace vault, and he's like, this is the time. I'm all powerful. Get the goblets out, right? Let's party with them. So they brought out the gold goblets that had been taken from the temple of God in Jerusalem, and the king and his nobles, his wives, and his concubines drank from them. As they drank the wine, they praised the gods of gold and silver, of bronze, iron, wood, and stone. And at this point, Yahweh had had enough. He's like, you know what? I'm sick of it, okay? You ever been a parent and had children that just don't listen, and it's like the fourth time you had to repeat? I was like, I'm sick of it. No more. Throw the TV in the garbage. I don't care, whatever it takes. It's that kind of situation. You're going to do something drastic to prove a point. So suddenly, remember what I said about Nebuchadnezzar saying you can't stop the hand of God. Man, you can't this is crazy. It says, suddenly the fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote on a plaster wall near the lampstand in the royal palace. Meaning, think about it. You're partying, all of a sudden a hand appears. It's not like a marker right on the wall. The plaster is being pushed in on the wall, meaning this is not a human hand. This is something more powerful than human, and begins to write a message on the wall. You can imagine the record was screeched and stopped, and the party was over, and people were dropping drinks and all kinds of stuff. Party comes to a halt, and he can't read what it says. He can't read it. Nobody can read it. So in verse 6 it says, his face turned pale, and he was so frightened that his legs became weak, and his knees were knocking. And can you imagine? His knees, he's so scared. He didn't look so powerful now. And Belshazzar, so he announces that whoever can read this, whoever can interpret this for me, I'm going to give you wealth. I'm going to make you rich, and I'm going to make you the third most powerful person in this kingdom. I would imagine that a lot of them, I'd be like, oh, I'm going to guess. I might be right. If I get it right, woo, that's awesome. That's a kind of a lottery situation there. But nobody steps up. Nobody steps up, right? And so his queen, who apparently either wasn't invited or did like an Irish exit and like didn't say anything, she wasn't there at the moment, meaning she heard the commotion, what was going on in the banquet hall, and so she steps in and she glances at the strange script and says, honey bun, continue on in verse 10, it says, don't be alarmed. Don't look so pale. There is a man in your kingdom who has the spirit of the holy gods in him. She's like, I know a guy. Hold on. I remember this dude. He can help us. So King Nebuchadnezzar appointed him chief of the magicians, enchanters, astrologers, and diviners. He did this because Daniel was found to have a keen mind and knowledge and understanding, and also the ability to interpret dreams, explain riddles, and solve difficult problems. Call for Daniel, and he will tell you what the writing means. So now Daniel, imagine, when we talk about King Nebuchadnezzar, that was 20 years to Daniel being in Babylon. Now this is 40 years later after that. Daniel was probably 70, 80, somewhere in that range. He was an old guy now, and apparently he had been forgotten because they weren't like immediately, get Daniel, right? The queen somehow remembered him. And so Daniel, they went and retrieved him. They ushered him in. And Belshazzar repeats his promise of glory and wealth. You'll get this if you interpret this for me. So Daniel, I would imagine, kind of shakes his head and is like, I've been here before. Why is this happening to me again? Kind of thing. It's like, I can't get away from these people, this family. And so he glances at the strange script, and this is where we pick up in Daniel 5:17. It says, then Daniel answered the king, you may keep all your gifts for yourself and give your rewards to someone else. Nevertheless, I will read the writing for the king and tell him what it means. Your Majesty, the Most High God gave your father Nebuchadnezzar, grandfather, sovereignty and greatness and glory and splendor. Because of the high position he gave him, all the nations and peoples of every language dreaded and feared him. But when his heart became arrogant and hardened with pride, he was deposed from the royal throne and stripped of his glory. And he essentially goes through the whole thing, kind of recaps what happened, the ox thing, all the humiliation. And then he goes, until he acknowledged that the Most High God is sovereign over the kingdoms of men and sets over them anyone he wishes. And I would imagine, and I would have done this, Daniel kind of like pauses for dramatic effect. Again, Michael Bay movie, like, kind of thing. He pauses and then he goes, but you, Belshazzar, his son, have not humbled yourself, though you knew all of this. He's like, you knew the story. You knew what happened to your grandfather. You were warned, and you did this anyways. In 23, it says, instead, you have set yourself up against the Lord of heaven. And then I would imagine Daniel got like visibly angry because he then begins to look around the room and see what's going on. He really begins to reveal the situation, right? That he had all the precious artifacts that he saw when he was probably a kid or heard about when he was a kid that was in the temple of their God, Yahweh, now being used for their party. I would imagine. I would be mad too. And so he said to the king, you had the goblets from the temple brought to you, and you and your nobles, your wives, and your concubines drank from them. You praise the gods of silver and gold, of bronze, iron, wood, and stone, which cannot see or hear or understand. But you did not honor the God who holds in his hand your life and all your ways. Therefore, he sent the hand, remember the hand, that wrote the inscription. And he could have added in this moment, Are you sure you want to know what it says? After I just explained this, that you knew better, and you did all of this, are you sure you want me to tell you what it says? Daniel 5:26. This is what these words mean. Mene. God has numbered the days of your reign and brought it to an end. Meaning your leadership was alone, and God's calling on the lone. Time to pay up. 27. Tekel. You have been weighed on the scales and found wanting. Meaning you are accountable and you've been evaluated. Perez. Your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. Meaning you thought it was yours. It was never yours. God gives and he takes away, and now he's taking away. While all this was going on, unbeknownst to the people in the room in this dramatic Michael Bay moment, right? The Persian army, the Persian engineers were at the Euphrates River, which runs through Babylon. So they're on the north side of Babylon at the Euphrates River, so the water will flow down. And they have figured out a way to reroute the water to a swamp that was nearby. So what that did is that caused the water to drop lower and lower and lower to the point where the Persian SEAL team could then go under the wall, right? It was enough that they could go under the wall, get up in there, inside the wall, go to the gates, slay, kill all the soldiers guarding the gates, and then they were able to force open these massive doors, letting in all the army. By diverting the water supply, they were able to take over the city. And so the Persians took the city that night, and in Daniel in 5:30, it says, Daniel tells us that very night, Belshazzar, king of the Babylonians, was slain. What an ending. The Most High God is sovereign over the kingdoms of men and gives them to anyone he wishes. I'm not sure how all that works. I'm not sure any human is. But if it's true, and I think it is, there's something for all of us who have any measure of influence in our life, no matter your age, no matter your place in life. If you have influence, there's something to learn from this story. Your talent, education, family connections, hard work, or whatever you fell backwards into, now you have influence, whatever that might be, what you do with that influence determines if you're a leader worth following and emulating. So this idea is so life-changing, this thought of how we view our leadership, that until, unlike Nebuchadnezzar in his early years and Belshazzar, when we view our influence, no how great or small it might be, as a temporary stewardship for which we are accountable for, we will be far less likely to spend it all, focus it all, or leverage it all for ourselves. We will realize that it wasn't ours to begin with, and that we are meant to use it in such a way that God would see fit. We'll be far more inclined to leverage our leadership for those who we have the privilege to lead. We won't need to remind ourselves that greatness is not more than progress. That's a big one. When we choose to embrace a definition of leadership that incorporates this idea that leadership is a stewardship, it's temporary, and we are accountable, we won't have to be reminded that people matter. We will know that people matter most, and what's best for people is best. We'll understand that it's because of God who loaned us this temporary opportunity that we have to use. We'll know that. Whether you're leading a family, business, nonprofit, a division, a department, a team, a city, a state, or even president, leading a nation. Remember this. This is for everybody in the room. Your leadership is a stewardship. It is temporary. It will run out. And you will be held accountable for it. Whatever you do with it, you will be held accountable for, no matter how great or small it may be. And we know this because Daniel told you, and he told me right here in Scripture, that the Most High is sovereign over the kingdoms of men, and he gives them to anyone he wishes. So over the next 3 weeks, we'll be sharing 3 vital aspects of leadership, right? It's not all the aspects of leadership, just 3 vital ones, and especially in times of uncertainty. And if you're like, I don't know if I'm in those times. If you're a teacher right now, you are leading children in times of uncertainty. If you are a parent, you are constantly leading kids in times of uncertainty. If you are new to a job, you're in a time of uncertainty. If you are a boss to someone who started a job, you're leading someone in a time of uncertainty. If you know anybody that has lost someone, lost their job, or something crazy has happened in the past 2 years because of what we've faced, you are leading somebody in uncertainty. So, as we walk through this, take these things, apply them to the people you're leading, and take the opportunity to take the lead. Usually, if they're in front of you and you're wondering, should I do something? Should I lead them? God's going, yes! I've given you this window. Don't waste it. Don't waste your opportunity to lead. And also, don't miss next Sunday. Don't miss any Sunday of this collection or any Sunday beyond that. But specifically, while I'm preaching this collection, don't miss it. I guarantee you it will change the way you see things. And then also, join a village. Join a village, join a village, join a village, join a village. Okay, villages are small groups if you're new. We're starting them this week. Join one, because what we do is we take this, what we talked about today, and we unpack it even more during the week. And it's so good to do because it's not only just hearing it from me, but you get to get a vantage point from all the other people and the stories that they tell and how they're struggling or how they're succeeding, and you get to build off of that. That's the beauty of the church. We get to do this together. So join a village, join a village, join a village, join a village. You hear that in your head? Join a village. Okay. And then let's go through this together. Because when we do it together, I guarantee you it's easier, it's more fulfilling. So let's pray. Lord, thank you so much. Thank you for Daniel. Thank you that Daniel recorded all of these things. Thank you that for his story and his bravery to record this stuff and to say these things on your behalf so that we can hear it now and apply it to our lives. So Lord, I pray for our leadership. I pray for our individual leadership as well, that we would take this opportunity, take these chances, and not let our windows close. The chances to lead others, to better their lives, to better themselves, to make them and to put them in a situation to draw closer to you. I pray that we do not miss these opportunities because we know now it's temporary. So Lord, shine the light on the areas where you want us to lead. Empower us to do this. Give us the courage to step out in faith and take the lead. Lord, I pray for each and every individual in this person in this room. If they're in a season of uncertainty right now, or they're going to be, or they're leading somebody in it, whether they're in the room, whether they're watching online, whether it's today, tomorrow, a week from now, a year from now, I pray that they would feel that pull, that leadership is a stewardship. It's temporary, and we're accountable for it so that we can use it in the best that we can. Lord, bless Village Heights, bless these people as you go, and anybody that listens. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.